What happens when one of the biggest movie stars in the world walks onto a daytime talk show expecting to promote a new project, and instead finds himself face-to-face with questions he clearly wasn't prepared to answer? Make sure to subscribe to Echo Stars and like and comment for more talk show coverage. The cameras are already rolling. The audience is clapping, that familiar upbeat daytime energy filling the studio. The hosts are seated around the table, smiling as they do when a major guest is introduced. And joining us now, one of the co-hosts says, gesturing toward the entrance, Academy Award winner, producer, and global superstar, Will Smith. Will Smith walks out to loud applause. He's smiling, waving, giving a quick point into the crowd. He hugs one of the hosts, shakes hands with another. When he reaches Joy Behar, the greeting is polite but noticeably brief, a quick cheek kiss, a small nod. "Good to see you," Joy says, smiling. "Always good to be here," Will replies, settling into his seat. The applause fades. The tone is light at first. "So you've got this new film coming out next month," another host begins. "You're back in action mode." Will grins. "Yeah, I had to get back to running and jumping off things. My knees reminded me I'm not 25 anymore." Audience laughter. Joy leans in. "But you still look 25. "Well, that's lighting." Will shoots back quickly, getting another round of laughs. They talk about the movie for a few minutes, the training, the cast, filming overseas. It's easy, comfortable. Will is relaxed, telling stories, joking about stunt mishaps. The audience is with him. Then the shift comes. Joy folds her hands on the table. Will, it's been a couple of years since that moment at the Oscars." The audience reacts immediately, a mix of murmurs and a few scattered claps. Will's smile tightens. It's subtle, but it's there. Joy continues, her tone calm but direct. "You've spoken about it publicly. You've apologized. But a lot of people still feel like they never really got a clear answer about what was going through your mind that night." Another host jumps in gently. "Joy." "No, I think it's fair," Joy says, holding her ground but still smiling. "It's something people still talk about." Will leans back slightly in his chair. He nods once. "I've talked about it a lot," he says carefully. "It was a mistake. I reacted emotionally." "I've said that." Joy nods. "Yes, but when you say emotionally, some people hear excuse." The audience makes that sharp daytime talk show sound. Half gasp, half, "Oh." Will's jaw tightens just a bit. "I'm not making excuses," he replies. "I'm explaining. There's a difference." Joy tilts her head. "But do you understand why some people think that explanation still centers you, and not the person you hit?" Another host tries to soften it. "I think what Joy is asking is whether you've had direct communication." "I know what she's asking," Will says, still calm, but the warmth has dropped a few degrees. There's a pause. "I've apologized publicly. I've apologized privately," he continues. "I've done the work. Therapy. Self-reflection. You don't just move on from something like that." Joy looks at him steadily. "But do you feel like Hollywood moved on faster than the public did?" The audience murmurs again. Will lets out a small breath through his nose. "That's an interesting question." He glances briefly down the table, then back at Joy. "I think people move on when they're ready to move on. I can't control that." Joy presses. "But you've got a new movie. Big press tour. Big premieres. Some would say you're right back where you were." Another co-host interjects quickly. "Well, he did face consequences." "I'm not denying that," Joy says. "I'm just asking if enough changed." Will's posture shifts. He leans forward now, elbows lightly on the table. "A lot changed," he says, voice firmer. "My family changed. My career changed. My relationships changed. Just because you see me sitting here doesn't mean nothing happened." There's a clap from somewhere in the audience. A few more follow. Joy doesn't back down. "But you're still a powerful man in Hollywood." "And?" Will asks, eyebrows lifting. "And power matters," Joy replies. "Especially when it's used in a moment like that." The temperature at the table noticeably rises. The other hosts exchange quick glances. "Joy," one of them says cautiously, "we don't want to relitigate." "No, I'm not relitigating," Joy insists. "I'm asking about accountability." Will nods slowly. "Accountability is when you accept what you did, you apologize, and you face consequences." "And have you faced enough?" Joy asks directly. The audience goes silent. There it is. Will stares at her for a second longer than comfortable television usually allows. "Enough for who?" he says quietly. "For the public," Joy responds. Will gives a small shake of his head. "That's the part that's tricky." If I base my growth on whether strangers feel satisfied, I'll never grow. I'll just perform remorse forever. A ripple of reaction spreads through the crowd, some clapping, some uneasy shifting. Joy folds her arms loosely. So you don't think the public deserves more? I think the public deserves honesty, Will replies. And I've tried to give that. Another host steps in. Let's also remember, he resigned from the academy, he was banned. And I accepted that, Will says quickly. Without complaint. Joy's voice remains steady, but sharper now. But you also won Best Actor that same night. The audience reacts again. Will's expression hardens just slightly. I didn't give that award to myself, he says. No, but you accepted it. And I shouldn't have? Will asks. I'm asking if you've ever thought about whether stepping back from that moment would have sent a stronger message. There's an audible intake of breath from the crowd. One of the hosts whispers, Okay. Will leans back again, this time crossing one leg over the other. His tone is still controlled, but there's steel in it now. You're asking me if I should have rejected the biggest professional achievement of my life because I made a mistake earlier that night. I'm asking if it would have shown deeper accountability, Joy says. And I'm telling you, Will responds, voice firmer, that I can hold two truths at the same time. I can have made a mistake and still have earned that award. A portion of the audience claps loudly. Others remain quiet. Joy nods. Once lips press thin. But you understand why that's hard for people to reconcile, she says. Will looks straight at her. I understand why it's complicated, he replies. What I don't understand is the idea that I'm supposed to erase myself to make everyone else comfortable. There's a low wow from somewhere in the audience. The other hosts visibly tense. One reaches for her mug. Another shifts papers in front of her. Classic live TV distraction. Joy leans in slightly. No one's asking you to erase yourself, she says. But people are asking whether you truly grasp the weight of what you did. Will doesn't smile this time. I live with it every day, he says quietly. And for the first time since the topic came up, the energy in the room shifts from debate to something heavier, more personal. The audience is silent now. Joy watches him closely. Then help us understand, she says. Will inhales slowly. And you can feel it. The conversation is no longer about a movie. It's no longer about awards. It's about pride, regret, public judgment. And it's only just beginning. Will exhales slowly, glancing down at the table for a moment before looking back up. You want to understand, he says. Okay, I'll try. The audience is completely quiet now. No laughter. No clapping. Just that tense stillness that only happens on live television when everyone senses something real is about to unfold. That night, Will continues, wasn't just about a joke. It wasn't just about anger. It was about a lot of things I hadn't dealt with properly. Pressure. Ego. Protectiveness. Years of trying to be this image. Joy watches him carefully. The image of what? The nice guy, Will says. The fun guy. The guy everybody likes. One of the co-hosts nods slowly. America's favorite. Exactly, Will says. And when that cracked, it cracked publicly. Joy doesn't soften. But the crack hurt someone else. Will nods immediately. Yes. And that's the part one regret most. There's a murmur in the audience, quieter this time, not reactive, just listening. Joy leans forward slightly. So what was it really about? Because a joke, however inappropriate, doesn't usually make someone walk on stage and hit another person. Will's jaw tightens again. You're right, he says. It wasn't just about the joke. Another host quickly interjects, and we're not asking you to psychoanalyze yourself on live TV. No, it's okay, Will says, raising a hand gently. This is part of it. He turns back to Joy. It was about feeling like I was failing in my personal life. It was about frustration I hadn't expressed. It was about wanting to prove something, to myself more than anyone else. Joy raises an eyebrow. Prove what? That I could protect, Will replies. That I could stand up. That I wasn't weak. The word hangs in the air. Joy responds carefully. And do you now see that strength doesn't look like that? Yes, Will says immediately. I do. There's scattered applause, hesitant at first, then stronger. Joy doesn't clap. She keeps her hands folded. But here's where some people struggle, she says. You say you've grown. You say you've learned. But from the outside, it still looks like you're being celebrated. Will's tone shifts slightly sharper. So growth only counts if you disappear? No, Joy replies quickly. But visibility comes with responsibility. And I've taken responsibility, Will says, voice rising just a notch. The audience reacts to the change in volume. A few okay murmurs. Another host steps in. Let's keep this respectful. I am being respectful, Will says, looking at her, then back at Joy. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend I haven't paid a price. Joy responds calmly. What do you consider the price? Will laughs once, not amused. My reputation, he says. My peace. The way people look at me. The way my kids had to answer questions at school. You don't think that's a price? The audience claps louder now. Joy nods, acknowledging the point. Those are real consequences. But some would argue those are social consequences, not professional ones. Will leans forward again, palms flat on the table now. I was banned from the academy for 10 years. And yet you're still working, Joy says. Should I not work? Will shoots back. There's a collective gasp. One of the co-hosts quickly says, That's not what she's saying. Joy keeps her voice steady. No one's saying you shouldn't work. I'm asking whether the system protects its stars. Will stares at her. You think I was protected? I think powerful people often are, Joy replies. The tension spikes again. Will shakes his head slowly. That narrative is easy. Big Star gets away with it. It's neat. It's simple. But it ignores the human part. And what's the human part? Joy asks. That I was ashamed, Will says, voice lowering. Deeply ashamed. The audience quiets again. I watched that footage back, he continues. I saw my face. I didn't recognize myself. That's not a good feeling. Joy softens slightly. Then why do you seem defensive now? Will pauses. Because, he says carefully, there's a difference between being accountable and being perpetually punished. That line lands. A few audience members clap immediately. Joy tilts her head. Punished by who? By public expectation that I'm supposed to bow my head forever, Will replies. Another host adds gently. Do you feel like you're not allowed to move forward? Will nods once. Sometimes, yeah. Joy counters. But moving forward doesn't mean moving past the conversation. I'm not trying to move past it, Will says. I'm trying to move through it. The audience reacts positively to that phrasing. Joy glances briefly toward the crowd, then back at him. Let me ask you something directly, she says. If another actor did what you did, not you, someone else, would you think they should just return to business as usual? Will doesn't answer immediately. That pause is noticeable. Finally, he says, I'd want to see growth. And have we? Joy presses. Will's eyes narrow slightly. You're looking at it. Joy holds his gaze. Are we? The temperature at the table rises again. Another host jumps in. Okay, I think we're circling the same point. No, Joy says, not raising her voice but firm. Because this matters. When celebrities make mistakes, the public watches how the industry responds. It sets a tone. Will's voice is controlled, but there's frustration underneath now. So what's the tone you want? He asks. Exile? Permanent disgrace? Because that's what it sounds like. That's not fair, Joy replies. What's not fair, Will says, leaning in again, is pretending like I walked away untouched. The audience claps loudly again, this time more divided. Some cheer. Others stay quiet. Joy sighs slightly. No one said untouched. But that's the implication, Will says. Another host places a hand lightly on the table. Let's all take a breath. There's a small, nervous laugh from the audience. Joy looks at Will more thoughtfully now. Can I ask something personal? Will nods cautiously. Depends. A ripple of laughter. Joy continues. Has this changed how you see yourself as a role model? Will's expression shifts, less combative, more reflective. Yes, he says after a moment. Completely. How? Joy asks. I used to think being a role model meant being flawless in public, Will says. Now I think it means owning your flaws in public. That earns applause. Joy nods slowly. That's fair. There's a brief lull, the first real easing of tension since the conversation turned. But then Joy adds, however. The audience immediately reacts with a knowing groan. Will gives a small, tight smile. There's always a however. Joy doesn't smile back this time. However, she continues, owning flaws also means sitting in uncomfortable conversations like this without framing them as attacks. And there it is again. Will's expression hardens slightly. I'm not framing it as an attack, he says. I'm responding to how it feels. And how does it feel? Joy asks. Like no answer is going to be enough, Will says. The room goes still. Joy doesn't interrupt this time. It feels like, he continues, voice firm but not loud. No matter what I say, the headline is already written. There's a noticeable shift in the audience. Less judgment now, more empathy. Another host quietly says, "That's a real fear." Joy watches him carefully. "But do you see why people still have questions?" she asks, softer now. "Yes," Will replies. "I do. I just don't think those questions should define the rest of my life." A few people clap again. Joy nods slowly, but her expression suggests she's not entirely convinced. And you can feel it. This isn't over. The conversation hasn't exploded yet. But it's building. The politeness is thinning. The space between accountability and accusation is getting smaller. And the next question could push it past the point of calm debate. There's a brief pause at the table. One of the producers off-camera signals something, but the hosts ignore it. The audience can feel that this is no longer a standard promotional segment. No one reaches for the cue cards. Joy looks at Will steadily. "Let me ask it this way," she says. "Do you think you would have been treated the same way if you weren't Will Smith?" The audience reacts immediately, a wave of murmurs. Will blinks once. "What does that mean?" "It means," Joy continues, "if you were a lesser-known actor or someone without decades of goodwill built up, do you think the outcome would have been the same?" Another host quickly jumps in. "Joy, no, that's fair," Will says, holding up his hand. "Let her finish." Joy nods slightly. "There's a perception that your status cushioned the fall." Will leans back slowly, crossing his arms now. "You think I was cushioned?" he asks. "I think you were insulated in ways others might not have been," Joy replies. The audience splits, some clapping, some groaning. Will shakes his head. "Insulated? I was dragged for months." "You were criticized, yes," Joy says. "But professionally?" Will laughs again, but there's no humor in it. "You think studios weren't nervous? You think deals didn't pause? You think projects didn't get reevaluated?" Joy shrugs slightly. "But they didn't disappear. And that's the problem?" Will fires back. The temperature spikes again. Another host tries to smooth it. "We're talking about systems, not you personally. But it is personal," Will says firmly. "You're talking about my life." Joy responds quickly, "Public life. That's different." "No, it's not," Will says. "Not when my kids are involved. Not when my wife is dragged. Not when my family has to relive it every time it trends." There's a strong round of applause from the audience now. Joy lets the applause fade before speaking again. "I'm not minimizing that," she says. "I'm questioning whether the industry holds its most powerful people fully accountable." Will looks directly at her. "You keep saying powerful. Like that word alone means I don't get to be human." "That's not what it means," Joy replies. "Then what does it mean?" Will presses. "It means influence," Joy says. "It means your actions send messages." "And my apology didn't?" Will asks. Joy hesitates for half a second. "Some people didn't feel it did." Will exhales sharply. "So we're back to feelings." The audience reacts again, a mix of nervous laughter and tension. Joy's voice becomes firmer. Public trust is built on feelings. And public outrage is fueled by them, Will shoots back. Another host interjects. Okay, let's. "No," Will says, holding up his hand again. "Because here's what bothers me." The room quiets instantly. There's this idea that I'm supposed to be an example of what happens when someone messes up. That I need to be the cautionary tale. And if I'm not miserable enough for long enough, then I didn't learn. That line lands hard. A large portion of the audience applauds loudly. Joy doesn't clap. She leans forward again. "It's not about misery. It's about consistency." "What does that even mean?" Will asks. "It means," Joy continues, "your tone right now feels defensive, not reflective." That comment hits. Will's eyebrows lift. "Defensive? I'm sitting here answering every question." "Yes," Joy says, "but you're also pushing back on the premise of the questions." "Because the premise assumes I escaped something," Will replies, voice rising slightly. "And I didn't." Another host places a hand lightly on Will's arm. "We're not accusing you of escaping." "But it feels like that," Will says. Joy's voice sharpens now too. "It feels like you want the conversation to be over." "I want it to be honest," Will says. "And honesty includes discomfort," Joy responds immediately. The audience reacts again, louder this time. Will leans forward, both hands on the table. "You think this isn't uncomfortable?" he says. Joy doesn't answer right away. "You think I enjoy sitting here reliving the worst night of my career?" Will continues. "You think that's fun for me?" "No," Joy says quietly. "Then don't question whether I'm sitting in it," Will says. There's a collective whoa from the crowd. Another host quickly says, "Okay, let's lower," but Joy isn't backing down. No one is questioning whether you're sitting here, she says. We're questioning whether you fully grasp the broader impact. Will's voice tightens. What broader impact? Joy looks directly at him. Normalizing violence. The room goes dead silent. Even the co-hosts freeze. Will blinks slowly. Normalizing violence? He repeats. Yes, Joy says. You walked on stage and hit someone on live television. Millions watched. That matters. Will's jaw clenches. And what message do you think I sent by apologizing publicly, resigning, going to therapy? He asks. Joy responds, that you regret it. But the image still exists. And I can't erase that, Will says, frustration clear now. I can't go back in time. No one's asking you to, Joy replies. We're asking you to acknowledge the symbolism. Will's voice rises another notch. I have acknowledged it. The audience gasps. Another host quickly says, Okay. Will looks around the table. What more do you want me to say? Joy's expression remains steady. Maybe that the industry should have paused longer. Will laughs incredulously. So now I'm responsible for the industry's decisions? You're part of it, Joy says. I don't control it. Will responds louder now. The audience reacts loudly, some clapping, some murmuring. One of the hosts says firmly, let's all take a breath. But Will is clearly heated now. You're talking like I orchestrated some cover-up, he says. I dealt with what I did. Joy replies, voice still controlled but intense. And we're allowed to question whether it was enough. And I'm allowed to defend myself, Will says sharply. The tension peaks. The room feels split. One host tries again to redirect. Let's bring this back to growth, Will shakes his head. No, because this is the part people don't see. He turns back to Joy. You sit here and say powerful people. Like I'm some untouchable machine. I'm a man who messed up. In public. And paid for it. And is still paying for it. The audience applauds strongly now. Joy waits for the noise to settle. No one is denying you're human, she says. But being human doesn't remove responsibility. And I've taken responsibility, Will says louder than before. There's an audible tension in his voice now. Not just frustration, but hurt. Joy responds. Responsibility also means accepting that people will keep questioning. Will leans back abruptly, shaking his head. So there's no timeline, he asks. No point where it's okay to say, he messed up, he learned, let's move forward. Joy pauses. That depends on the person watching, she says. Well, lets out a sharp breath. So I'm at the mercy of public mood, he says. That's part of celebrity, Joy replies. Will's eyes narrow slightly. No, that's part of spectacle. Another loud murmur from the audience. Joy opens her mouth to respond, and the producer's voice can faintly be heard off camera. We need to go to break. One of the hosts quickly jumps in, forcing a smile. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. But the tension doesn't fade. Will is still leaning back, jaw tight. Joy is sitting upright, composed but clearly firm in her stance. The audience is buzzing, whispering, reacting, some shaking their heads, some nodding. As the music cues up and the cameras pull slightly wider, you can see it. This isn't resolved. Not even close. And whatever happens after this break is going to decide whether this stays a debate or turns into something far more explosive. The show comes back from commercial, and you can immediately feel that the energy in the studio hasn't reset. The applause is polite, but it's not the same light daytime applause from earlier. It's cautious, curious. The audience knows they're stepping back into something unfinished. One of the co-hosts forces a smile. We're back with Will Smith. Will nods slightly. He's composed, but the edge is still there. Joy sits upright, hands folded on the table, calm but firm. The host continues carefully. Before the break, we were having a very real conversation. There's a small ripple of nervous laughter from the audience. Will speaks first this time. Look, he says, voice measured but strong. I don't mind hard questions. I really don't. But there's a difference between accountability and this idea that I'm supposed to carry this forever in a way that keeps reopening it. Joy responds immediately. But you are going to carry it forever. That's what happens when something plays out on global television. There's a murmur from the crowd. Will nods slowly. I accept that. What I don't accept is the idea that my entire career, my entire identity, should be reduced to one moment. Joy tilts her head. It's not being reduced. It's being contextualized. And who decides that context? Will fires back. The audience reacts again, louder this time. One of the hosts jumps in quickly. Okay, let's take this down just a notch. But Will isn't backing off now. Because here's what it feels like, he continues. It feels like no matter what I say, it's not going to satisfy a narrative. Joy shakes her head slightly. This isn't about narrative. It's about impact. And impact isn't erased by apology, Joy adds. Will leans forward again. I never said it was erased. Then why do you sound like you want it to be? Joy asks. There's a collective "oh" from the audience. Will's voice rises, not shouting, but sharp. Because every time I sit down for an interview, we go right back there. Every time. I'm here to talk about my work too. And you have, another host says gently. We did. But the public still has questions, Joy insists. Will's hands spread slightly on the table. Then maybe the public has to decide when enough is enough. I can't live in permanent trial mode. The audience applauds loudly at that line. Joy waits for the applause to fade. Trial mode implies you're being prosecuted, she says. We're having a conversation. Will responds instantly. It doesn't feel like just a conversation. That line hangs in the air. There's no applause this time. Just silence. Joy studies him carefully. So what does it feel like? Will pauses. It feels, he says slowly, like I'm being asked to prove my humanity over and over. That hits. Some audience members clap softly. Others stay still. Joy's voice softens slightly. When you're a public figure, people feel ownership over your image. That's the problem, Will says. They don't own me. The audience reacts, louder applause now. Another host nods. I think what's happening here is two truths colliding. People feel hurt by what happened. And you feel hurt by how long you're being defined by it. Will nods once. Exactly. Joy doesn't nod. But those truths aren't equal, she says quietly. The audience reacts sharply again. Will's expression tightens. What does that mean? It means, Joy continues, the harm done publicly weighs heavier than the discomfort of being questioned publicly. There's a split reaction, half applause, half groans. Will exhales through his nose. So my discomfort doesn't matter, he asks. That's not what I said, Joy replies. But that's how it sounds, Will says firmly. Another host jumps in quickly. We're running short on time, but Will keeps going. I'm not asking for sympathy, he says. I'm asking for space to grow without being told that growth isn't enough. Joy responds, growth isn't something you declare. It's something people observe. Will nods. Then observe it. The audience applauds loudly again. Joy looks at him steadily. We are. And there it is again, that friction. One of the hosts finally steps in decisively. Okay, I think this has been one of the most honest conversations we've had at this table in a long time. There's applause. She turns to Will. We appreciate you staying in it. Will nods. I didn't come here to run from it. Joy adds. And I didn't ask these questions to attack you. Will looks at her for a long moment. I know, he says, though his tone suggests it wasn't that simple. The host quickly pivots. Before we wrap your new film, the audience laughs nervously. Will manages a small smile. Yes, I promise it's not about controversy. That gets a genuine laugh from the crowd, easing the tension slightly. They briefly mention the release date. The trailer plays on the screen behind them. It feels almost surreal after what just happened. As the show ends, the hosts thank him. Will stands, shakes hands. He hugs the co-host who moderated the last few minutes. When he reaches Joy, there's a brief pause. They shake hands. It's always real with you, Joy says quietly, audible just enough for the microphones. Will nods. I respect real. The credits start rolling. But that's not where it ends. By the time the episode finishes airing on the East Coast, clips are already circulating online. Short segments of the exchange between Will and Joy begin trending. Hashtags start popping up, some defending Will, others praising Joy for asking the tough questions. On X and Instagram, fans argue in the comments. Some say Will handled himself with honesty and composure under pressure. Others say he became defensive and avoided the core issue. Entertainment blogs pick up the headline within hours. Tense exchange on daytime TV. Will Smith pushes back. Joy Behar challenges Hollywood accountability. Reaction videos start appearing that same evening. Body language analysts dissect every lean forward, every raised eyebrow. Commentators debate whether the conversation crossed a line or was exactly what daytime television is supposed to do. Behind the scenes, sources later report that the post-show green room was noticeably quiet. No shouting, no dramatic walk-offs. Just a heavy, reflective atmosphere. Will reportedly thanked the production staff before leaving. Joy stood by her questions during the show's off-air debrief. Producers acknowledged that it was tense, but real. And that's the thing about live television. It doesn't wrap itself up neatly. It exposes cracks. It forces conversations that don't always end in agreement. Some viewers praised the show for not avoiding the topic. Others accused it of ambushing a guest who came to promote a project. But one thing is certain, it wasn't forgettable. It wasn't polite filler. It was messy, human, uncomfortable. Exactly the kind of moment that keeps daytime talk relevant. And now we want to hear from you. Was Will right to push back? Was Joy right to press him? Did the conversation go too far, or not far enough? Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to Echo Stars for more real talk show stories.